Welcome to the Rachel and Cassandra Show. Before we begin, our disclaimer. Rachel and Cassandra both live and work in Michigan. They are only licensed in their respective fields.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this week. My name is Rachel Evers, and in my never-ending quest to give you good information and entertainment, I have a very special guest here with me today. I wish I had a drum roll for you.
No
Do we have a drum roll? Oh. No drum roll. Maybe
next time.
We'll add one later. Today in studio with me, I have Eric Ensley.
Hello.
Hi, Eric. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell people who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'm Eric Ensley. I'm a local lender here with Ross Mortgage. I'm one of the founding members of the Veteran Lending Council. We train loan officers. We train real estates around the country about VA loans. I originate VA loans as my full-time job. I'm a 9-year veteran. Spent time in the Michigan Army National Guard as a paratrooper and served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Father of 2 beautiful girls, husband of a beautiful Dr. Ensley at home. That's who I am.
Is your wife really a doctor?
She has her doctorate in physical. She's a doctor of physical therapy. She works with brain and spinal cord injury patients.
Super impressive.
She is super impressive.
Just to say doc. And what I was going to...
Our first year of marriage was my Afghanistan deployment and her last year of her doctorate.
Really?
She is a warrior. Can do it all.
While you were talking about you, I was going to sum it up by saying you're a stud, but I think your wife might be a stud.
She is.
That's amazing.
She is. Yeah.
So, can we talk about your lawn? That's what I really have you here today
I only
for.
want to talk about my lawn. I'm glad we're on the same page there.
Yeah.
So,
Eric, you have a reputation.
I do. You're gonna build your brand over time, right? And you're only gonna be what you're gonna be. So you got to just stick to some things. So I'm the VA guy.
Yes.
I'm a good dad.
Yes.
And I love my kids.
Yes.
And I love my lawn.
And you love your
and
lawn.
obviously, I love my wife and Lord and Savior and all that. But the lawn definitely it's like part of embracing the dad thing.
Is
like it? I'm the guy that wants to put a bad tank top on and maybe some New Balances and go out and edge my asphalt driveway.
Yes. You guys, you got to, if you have not looked at Eric's, go look at his Facebook or find out where he lives and drive by his house. This perfection
Don't
of
do
the
it today.
lawn.
Do it tomorrow.
Lines. Yeah. Okay.
Because the stripes will be rocking.
Perfect.
It's gotten to a point where my 5-year-old is like if I cut diagonally and not straight out from the house in the backyard, she'll wake up and have breakfast, and she'll be sitting there and she'll be like, "Dad, I don't see the lines." And I'm like, or the fertilizer guy will come.
Yeah.
And she's like, "That guy doesn't do straight lines." And I'm like, some people you can't fix it. I don't know, honey. But she's on board with my my obsession.
No, it's a family thing.
Yes.
Have you always been that particular, or is that military training in action? Is it a trauma response?
No. Well, yeah, it's that I have a retired neighbor who mows his lawn 3 times a week, and I don't have time for that. However, when I mow my lawn, I'm going to assert dominance by striping it like a laser, right? This guy, he cuts his lawn a lot, but he doesn't cut it well. My attention to detail on my lawn, when it's done, you're like, oh, that guy hired a pro. To be fair, I mowed lawns, growing up. My brother had a lawn company, and when I was in college, I was
really
doing lawns.
I didn't know that. Was it just lawn mowing, or were you a landscaper?
Well, it depends on the season of life. When I was a kid, my brother had a lawn company that he paid his way through from the time he had his license, actually before he had his license, all the way up through finishing his master's. He was running a lawn company, and that's how he did what he did.
So you said when I was a kid. How old are you in this part of life?
That would have been from
10?
From 13, 14 probably, because he's 3 years older than me. So he bought a Jeep and a trailer and a mower and started a company, and I'd help him out. So that's where that all started. And then after coming back from deployments and stuff, working my way through school, I would always end up landing jobs with lawn companies and some hardscape stuff, like patios and things like that.
Really?
But more time definitely sitting on a lawnmower.
You need to come to my house because I could use your expertise. I'll just set that outside.
You got too many trees to worry about your lawn. It's just never.
It's the hardscape stuff that I need. I need your eye for.
My arthritis says don't even talk about it anymore.
All right.
So.
Yes, that's fine. I'll get you out there one way or another. So you mentioned deployment. Can we talk about that?
Sure.
Because you are really, in reality.
I'm a very transparent guy when it comes to talking about combat, and I've got there's nothing I won't talk about in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys come back, won't talk about it. Some guys talk a lot and they're making it up. You see that. I see that for sure.
And you would recognize it better than I would.
I mean, it's easier, especially in my line of work where I'm writing VA loans, and somebody tells me they were, I was special forces in Vietnam, and then I get their DD-214. It's like, bro, you were a Air Force weather observer, and you've been telling people you were a Green Beret for 40 years.
This is a real thing that people do. Yeah, that's weird.
I mean, I'm kind of a, you do you. Like, if that's who you're going to be, it is what it is. I'll call you out on it, but I'm not going to lose sleep over it. Mm-hmm. But stolen valor is definitely a thing. We had guys in my first deployment. I went to Iraq, and I was 19 when I left, and 19-year-old kids who just came out of infantry school.
Why did you join the service? Can we go just a tiny bit before that? What was the driver there?
Well, anybody my age, I'm 34. I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. War kicked off. We had, when I was in high school, guys a couple classes ahead of me. A lot of people signed up, but Brighton lost a guy when I was, I think sophomore. He was a few years ahead of me, went over and didn't make it back. So, it was kind of, I think at that time you felt like a bigger responsibility to your country. Like the patriotism thing was pretty heavy back then. Now everybody seems to at least hate their government. But we've also lost sight of the wars that we're in and why we're in them, right? 9/11 was a very fresh feeling at that point where, you just had it. A lot of guys had a calling, right? And gals. When I say guys, let's assume that's inclusive.
Sure.
Okay. But the other part too is I was not terribly. I didn't have a real course set out. The military wasn't really something I was it's not like I grew up thinking I'm gonna be a soldier. Like that really didn't. It didn't really occur to me until I was probably a senior in high school, and I was like, well, you can't be a kid forever. You got to do something. Your friends are going to college, so you can go to college, or you can start somewhere else, or join the military. And
do you have military background in your family somewhere?
Nope, neither side.
So you're the first.
I'm the first. But it was, talking to a recruiter. It's like, well, this could be a good option for you to at least have something to do. That'll maybe give you time if it's not your career, but it could be a thing to set you up a little bit moving forward, right? Because you're getting out of high school with an income instead of going into debt, going straight into college. Presumably, the military is going to pay for your college at some point in some way, shape, or form, and you just have to not die in the meantime. And you're
you're getting some training and life experience.
Great experience.
You're not going to get that anywhere else.
It. Yeah. Now, when I went to enlist, and you take the Asvab, it's the first thing you do is they figure out, okay, what's your GT score and all that.
Wait, what does GT mean?
General tech.
Is it?
I don't actually know.
Is this like to place you? Like, are you a dummy or are
Pretty
you
much.
brilliant?
Yeah.
And we're going to find where you
I'll
fit.
give you a good example. So the Army has.
Oh no! Here we go.
The Army at the time had a minimum of a 50 that you had to have on the ASVAB, 50 percentile to get in. If you were shorter than that, you couldn't get in. If you wanted to join the Marine Corps, they would go all the way down to 32.
Oh, is that where this comes from?
Speaks for itself, doesn't it? Anyway.
Hold on. Do you know what the ASVAB stands for? I did not know this.
I would have known 15 years ago.
It is the Armed Service Battery Test.
There you go.
Why is there a V in there? Anyway, go ahead. It doesn't matter. The GT score is the General Technical Section.
That was close.
This score represents reading, language, and basic math skills.
Okay.
Now we'll set that down.
All right.
Back to
So
the story.
prior to taking the Asvab,
Yes.
met with a recruiter. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to join the infantry." Like, why? Well, that just seems to fit the best with, like, I was a football player, I was a wrestler.
And what is
It's like-
if I'm not a military person and I have no idea what an infantry is?
In my mind,
what is
at the
that?
time,
Yes.
the infantry was the people you make a movie about. If you're gonna make a war movie, you make it about the infantry. They're the
Okay.
guys on the they're the guys in the fight.
The fighters, the people
Yeah.
picking up weapons
The
and running at each other on the field.
Yeah, the infantry would tell you that, there's 150 jobs in the military, but 149 of them are there to support the infantry. Because it's true, you don't win wars without the infantry.
Okay.
You got to have boots on the ground. So recruiters are like, great, that's perfect, because anybody gets in the infantry, which is true.
The
like,
ASVAB score is they don't even
doesn't
look.
need, I mean, if you meet the minimum requirement to get in the military, great, you can be in the
Fogging a
infantry.
mirror, that
Pretty
kind
much.
of standard. Okay.
Yeah, which, kind of hurts my feelings, but then again, it kind of makes sense. Because the infantry is comprised of really two things. It's like, there's people that could do anything in the world. Some of them have. Like, I went to school, boot camp with guys that had just finished their degree, were college athletes, had job opportunities, and they're like, yeah, I'm joining the infantry.
So-
as a grunt, not as an officer.
So
It's like,
people
they
want,
just-
like, you're
yeah.
wired for wanting this, it sounds
Yeah,
like.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, in my mind, do the real thing. That's my opinion. Like, I don't want to be a mechanic in the military.
You don't
I can
wanna
go
be
be a mechanic down the road.
Right. Like the weather station guy you talked about earlier.
And I'm not trying to discredit any of those other jobs.
Nope.
It's just not what I wanted to do.
Gotcha.
Right.
Yes.
And it's, you could argue that's really dumb, right? Because you could go, like, why don't you go be a tech guy that's working on UAVs so that you can get a contractor
What's
job?
a UAV? We have a rule on the
I'm
show.
sorry,
Always speak English.
An unmanned air vehicle, right?
Okay.
A drone.
Drone.
So, like, I've got a buddy that he was no college degree at the time. He had some college, but no degree. Went through training to be a tech on these drones,
Yeah.
and then immediately got a contract as a civilian to teach the course he had just gone through. And it was like a 6-figure job, and he was 21.
What?
Right? Yeah, because he had technical skill that the military gave him. What was my technical skill? Well, I could shoot guns and jump out of planes, but that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story, long at this point.
Longer. Make it as long
yeah,
as
that's my bad.
possible. That's what we're here for.
Well, I took the ASVAB, and the recruiter gets the results, and he's like, "Oh, dude, you don't have to join the infantry. You can do anything you want." And I was like, "No, you don't understand."
So you're
Like,
brilliant.
Well, no,
You test well.
yeah, I got a fancy brain. I'm pretty smart.
Fancy brain. I'm writing that down. I like that language.
I was a fine student, lazy student, but test well because I'm a relatively smart guy. I would say at this point. Anyway, I wanted to join the infantry, and I said, "Look, man, I know I could do anything, and I appreciate your insight. I do want to join the infantry. I don't want to be in the airborne." And he's like, "Well, we don't have any slots for the airborne." And I was like, "Well, call me when you do." And he's
So
like,
you're
"Well,"
walking out the door.
he's like, "Well, we'll just get you in, and then later you can go to the airborne unit." I said, "No, call me when you have an airborne slot. I want it in the contract," which I'm glad I did that because I feel like most 18-year-olds wouldn't.
No,
They
I
just-
wouldn't have.
Yeah, and I don't actually know why I did, other than I just did, and I'm
Because you
glad I did.
don't
So-
trust your government. That's
Yeah,
why.
which remains to this day. So anyway, well, certainly don't trust recruiters. And
Right.
I got a lot of friends that are recruiters. I'm doing a loan for a recruiter right now. I would say it to any of them. I don't trust
Yep.
the thing you say. Not that mine was bad. He was fine, but I've seen some shady stuff take place for these guys. Anyway,
They have quotas too.
they sure do. So anyway, went to airborne school, or went to boot camp. And
So wait. You're like, no, I want this in my contract.
a couple months later, I get a call.
He did call you.
Yes.
So you did walk out the door. This is your fancy brain in action.
Yeah, I didn't enlist until I had that.
Okay,
lined
good.
up.
So he
So
calls.
there was
Love it.
at the time there was a long range surveillance unit. I enlisted in the Michigan Army National Guard, thinking I can do school and be in the Army. Maybe I want to make it a career, but at least I'll get school knocked out first.
And what does that mean, Army National Guard?
It's
Like-
a reserve component.
Okay.
So you have you have your federal components, you have your state components, you have active and reserve components of both of the federal. So meaning you have full-time Army, full-time Marines, full-time Air Force, full-time Coast Guard. Then you also have the Army Reserve, you have the Marine Corps Reserve, you have the Army National Guard. The difference between the Army Reserve and the Army National Guard, well, there's a few of them, but the obvious, or the biggest ones are the Army Reserve is a federal component called up by the president, and that's it. The Army National Guard is a state component that can be called up federally, but also can be called up by the state. So their pitch would be, it's not just going to war. It could also be serving your community in, riot control, disaster, hurricane stuff, things like that. COVID, a lot of people were activated for COVID that were in the National Guard. So you get different opportunities to serve.
Okay.
My understanding is, and I could be incorrect on this, is that there's not actually any combat arms elements of the Army Reserve, where the National Guard has infantry, the Reserve doesn't have. They're more support units. Another key difference that's a big one in my opinion is the Army Reserve will call up individuals and piece them together.
Like they'll call we want this guy.
We need 5, not we need your whole unit of 100.
And they pick the
Where
5.
the National Guard goes as a unit,
Always.
which is a big deal. Like, you want to go with people that you know, that you've trained with. It makes a huge difference that you know the guy who's at your left and right if you're going to be in those situations. So, anyway, I opted to do the National Guard, and if you can always, if it's my thought was finish school while you're in the National Guard. If you like the military, at that point, go full time. What ended up happening, and which is not an uncommon thing for that time, is the majority of people who were in Iraq and Afghanistan at that time were they were reserve components, so National Guard, reservists. You had people who were in it. They were out of active duty in what's called inactive ready reserve, meaning they did a 3-year contract, and for 5 years after that, they were technically inactive ready reserve. So they didn't put a uniform on, they didn't get paid, but in the event that the military needed them, they could get called back prior to a draft.
And those
guys were getting called back up.
And this is
weird.
Not a situation where they're like calling and asking if you wanna.
No, it's like
you
your
get
orders.
told.
Yeah. Like we had when I was coming back from Iraq, there was a unit of out of Hawaii that the whole unit was guys that were out that got called back in because they hadn't cleared that window. Every contract has that on the end where you have like if you were
like come in, do your shift, and then you're on call for 5 years.
Pretty much, yeah. Every military contract is an 8-year contract. Every initial military contract. So whether you're 3 years of active duty with 5 years of inactive ready reserve, where they might call you back, or 6 years in the National Guard, you'll have 2 years of inactive ready reserve where they might call you back.
Are these standard contracts, or is this something you negotiate when you meet with your recruiter?
That's pretty. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way around that. My understanding is every initial contract is an 8-year term in total.
Oh, I know, but I'm talking about how it's broken down. So if we have a rule for an 8-year term, could I go negotiate that I want to be active for 4 years and on call for 4 years?
Yeah, on active duty for sure. You could do a 3-year contract. You could do a 5-year contract, but it's always going to be 8 years in total. So it's just a question of
how it's split.
The balance.
Okay.
Right. But if you think about it from the government's perspective, they're going to pay to train you. Mm-hmm. They're going to create something from you. They need an expectancy of how long they can count on you. Right?
I can get that.
Like if you did a 2-year contract, but your training was 1.5 years, you just got free training and did nothing.
The training is in there, and boot camp and all of that.
Yeah, but a lot of the technical jobs that are not infantry require a lot more training, right? Infantry guys, we basically go camping with guns and then get in fights. I mean, that's easy enough to teach. It doesn't take a year. But there are some technical jobs for sure that take a long time to get through.
So back to your timeline, at 19, you get called. Were you 19?
19, I had cleared through basic training in airborne school, and I was in my unit. My first unit was out of Selfridge. It was a long-range surveillance unit, so it's small.
What does that mean?
It's small teams. The reason it was an airborne unit, it's designed for, in conventional warfare where there's actual enemy lines, they fly you over, 6 guys jump out, and they gather intelligence. So it's like kind of tactical stuff, right? Like it's fun. Like jump out behind enemy lines, gather intelligence.
What does that mean? Gather intelligence.
Well,
What
it
are you
depends
doing?
on what the mission is. So you might, in theory, like you could, let's say in Vietnam, they said, hey, okay, we're not past this river valley, but we're going to drop you over here. They're all waiting for us to come through, but we need to figure out, how big is the size of the elements that are behind that hilltop. So we're going to drop you in. You're going to gather. You're going to watch the, movement of the troops to know exactly what we're up against.
So you're just running around looking at stuff and taking notes? Are you taking
pictures?
pictures?
More or less.
Are you breaking and entering and stealing?
No, it's
is it like a spy movie?
It's like, it is more like, it's usually longer. It depends on the terrain for sure, right? Like they might say, go on somewhere on this hilltop. You're gonna plan your mission. They're gonna drop you in. You're gonna go to this portion of the hilltop, and you're gonna get eyes on this compound, and you're gonna watch for certain people. Maybe there's a key individual you're on the lookout for. They want to know before they drop a bomb on the building that guy is in the building, right? So you're just the guy there, looking, and then reporting, right?
Periscope. No,
and
that's a.
So you'd have, usually it would be split into two teams. So you have a 6-man team. You got your team leader, your assistant team leader, your senior scout, assistant scout, radio operator, and assistant radio operator.
So you've actually done this while you're dropped on the other side of the line and trying to gather intelligence. Are you ever actively being hunted by the enemy?
Well, ideally they don't know you're there, but in theory, I mean, if it's a war, you're kind of always being hunted.
In real life, somebody probably saw you get dropped.
Yeah, well, in real life, in my experience with the wars that we've been in, there aren't defined lines. That's why I use the Vietnam example, because it's easier. There were lines. There was, we're on this side and they're on that side.
Right.
The times that I was in Iraq, there wasn't really a line. We're fighting insurgencies. So, your mission is going to change based on the situation at hand, obviously. If you're fighting an insurgency and not against a uniformed enemy, then it changes how you're going to operate. So, there's still a need for the same type of boots on the ground, getting eyes on objectives and things like that, but it's different. It's gonna change. So, anyway, that was my first unit, and what was cool about that is kind of going back to like the types of people you find in the infantry. Like I'm brand new at this point. I know nothing because boot camp and all that's garbage. Like they don't train you how to be a real, like who you need to be in the military. Your team does that. Your unit does that. So it does make a big impact where you end up. And the unit that I went, I mean, a lot of these guys, they were, the prior active duty, they were Ranger Battalion guys. We had some Special Forces guys. Some of them came back and were, we had people that were doctors. We had people that were lawyers, people that were, ran construction companies, but they still wanted to serve, and they wanted to serve with the best that they could. So there, that's where that unit was. It was full of good leadership, good, just good dudes that you wanted to work with. It was one of those units where people had to die or retire for you to move up because people stayed there forever, because it was one of the last good, real good units. If that was your brand, so to speak.
Okay.
There's other units that get, like my first deployment was actually with a unit that, my experience was a lot different. My platoon sergeant was a guy I didn't get along with. His leadership style I learned a lot from, but not because of the good reasons. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was like, don't be that guy. And he knew that, and he didn't like me because of it. But fortunately for me, the Iraq deployment was boring, more or less. Like we got there, and again, as a 19-year-old kid who just volunteered to go to war, because I did. I volunteered to get on a deployment, not with my unit, but with a different unit that was going. That's how I ended up there. 2007 in Ramadi was a super hot time in the conflict. And then we got there in the beginning of 2008, and it was like a ghost town, more or less, which is a good thing. Like we got rocketed a few times, and when we came in, initially we thought, like this is going to get real exciting real fast, because there was the night we got drove to the camp we ended up on, a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, or an IED, but it's vehicle-borne. It's called a VBED. Basically, it was a dump truck filled with explosives. Hit the front gate. it shook the whole town. It was a huge explosion, killed 2 Marines at the gate. And that was day 1 of us getting there. And we, on the ride in, we had seen, like, off in the distance, there was fighting going on. You could see you could hear it and see it. And they're like, who's that? And like, oh, it's the Iraqi army fighting the Iraqi police. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah. Like, whose team are we on? Yeah. So it was like,
you know which team you're on.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of on your own team and just hoping to work with the people there and that they're going to not shoot you in the back, and that's ultimately how both deployments were, Iraq and Afghanistan. Afghanistan, there was a time where right when we were leaving, they stopped running missions like through the whole country. They did a stand down because there were so many Afghan counterparts of ours, because we were supposed to be integrated. Like, the idea is we're showing you how to like own your own country, and then so there was a rule, and I don't remember what the ratio was, but it was basically something like if there were, for every 5 Americans, you had to have an Afghan army guy with you. Yeah. And the Afghan army guys were turning on the Americans, and there were enough incidents where that took place that.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, so when you're on, like, Afghanistan, we were on an outpost for a lot of that deployment where it was 12 to 18 U.S. guys with a dozen Afghan guys surrounded by HESCO barriers, which are, you've probably seen pictures of. It's like a cardboard box in a cage that they fill with sand, and that's your perimeter, and that's it. And you're in the middle of Indian country. So it's like, okay, here we are defending, like, we're entirely,
this is terrifying.
Well, it could be, I suppose. I mean, at the time, like, that's the job. So
But you just told me that the Afghans were turning on the Americans, and you're almost a 1-to-1 ratio in this.
Well,
what do you call that?
You hope that you're in. That was a combat outpost.
Outpost.
So, experiences vary on deployments, right? You could have a very cush deployment where you're on a big base the size of Metro Detroit, or you end up, in a combat outpost in the middle of Indian country, waiting for helicopters to come and drop off fuel. Like, that's something.
Yeah, that sounds like something.
So, anyway, so my Iraq deployment, it went pretty. It was pretty slow. I mean, no deployment's fun. I mean, it's hot and you're wearing a bunch of gear, and it was a boring deployment. In the mindset of a young kid who wants to see combat because he's ignorant and stupid, it was a lame deployment because we didn't really see combat. We got rocketed a few times, things like that. But the war seemed to kind of be over when we were there. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure different areas of the country were dealing with different stuff. But so I came back from that deployment like disappointed, more or less. And then.
But you did ultimately get to see combat.
Yes, and it's a careful what you wish for sort of thing. Like, I mean, when you're a kid and you like coming back, hindsight's 20/20, right?
Always.
I came back from Iraq, like, kind of bitter at my chain of command, kind of bitter about the whole experience because it was like, well, that was a waste of my time, right? Like, and it was a waste of my time. Like, it was not. It was shortly after we left that deployment that. I mean, you could turn on the news and watch ISIS roll through Ramadi. Like, why did I spend a year of my life in Ramadi to just give it back to whoever?
How annoying.
Yeah, it's like super lame. And so, I speak for only myself on these things, but it's like, we watched the handoff of Afghanistan. Well, I've got blood, sweat, and tears poured into Afghanistan, and I've got, lives lost in Afghanistan that mean a lot to me. And what was that all for? And again, I don't speak for all veterans. That's my perspective.
Sure.
I also was in Ukraine for a while too.
Really?
I got to go there for a little bit, which was
in
cool.
Between or later on?
Actually, prior to going to Iraq, I got to do a few weeks of training in Ukraine it was a part of I was in that long range surveillance unit. It was part of a multinational training exercise. And anyway, the reason I say that is because now we're seeing Ukraine. It's like, join the military, see the world. And then 10 years later, watch it all fall apart. Like, everywhere you've been, it's kind of like,
is that how it's coming together for you?
It seems to be how it's going for me. Like, okay. Anyway, So, I came back again. I was in the Guard, so it wasn't like I came back and then had to report for duty. I went to the one day, or 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks in the summer, and all that kind of situation. Tried to work through school, got engaged to my wife, and then there was a deployment looming. Then they pushed it back, so we were going to get married after that deployment. And I knew at this point, like, I'm not a career, like, I don't want to make this a career.
Okay.
I like it, but it's just, I think there's something more for me, was kind of my thought at the time. But there was a deployment looming. I had a team. At this point, the state had shut down the original unit that I was in, that LERS unit. There was a new unit, or a unit changing to be a dismounted reconnaissance. It was RISTA reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition was what that was. So it kind of made sense.
Structural reorganization of
Well,
sorts?
it was a different. It was a different squadron. It was a whole different.
Okay.
I mean, that unit was literally gone. There was another unit on the west side of the state that used to be tankers, and they were changing it to be this dismounted reconnaissance unit. So they took advantage of the fact that they had a bunch of reconnaissance guys in the unit that just left or got shut down. So a bunch of us went over and took leadership positions in this new unit to try and make sure we were up to speed. Yes.
So dismounted makes me think not on horses. What does that mean?
Not in a tank.
Okay. Kind of not on horses.
Not in a truck, not in a... I mean, in theory.
You're on foot.
We have trucks, don't get me wrong. Or
with drones.
Or dropped off by helicopter or whatever.
Okay.
It wasn't an airborne unit where you jump out of the plane or a helicopter, but it was, what we did in Afghanistan is a lot of air mobile missions, where everybody gets on a Chinook.
Yep.
They fly you to wherever you need to fly to because no truck can get there.
Okay.
Afghanistan terrain is a lot different than Iraq. There were no tanks in Afghanistan because you couldn't drive a tank in Afghanistan.
I did not know
Most parts of Afghanistan.
Okay.
Very, very intense terrain.
Okay.
Which, if you look at the history of Afghanistan and all of the different entities that have tried to occupy it and failed, like Soviet Union failed, but they were like Soviet Union, like, we're going in with our tanks. Like, that ain't gonna work, and it doesn't.
Okay.
So it's a weird country. There was a village we used to meet with. We would go out and do these key leader engagements where you're trying to get engagement with the community, ideally so that they tell you where the bad guys are, right? But you got to win their trust. Again, going back to how we left that country, I feel like we went back on our word on that, in a lot of respects. But while we were there, you're trying to build relationships with these people so that they will be an asset to you and not a threat. But it's like, here we are in this little village where there's all these mud huts, and you've got, your orchards, and that's it. And there's a little creek that runs through it, and you're like, this is kind of a nice spot. It's not bad. There's vegetation. That's nice. It's like, oh yeah, my family, and you're talking through an interpreter, obviously. It's like, our family's been on this hill for 700 years. And you're like, well, it's not that nice of a hill. Like, like 700 years and you're still here. It's just a very different culture, right?
Yes.
You'd see nomadic people where it's like, hey, look at all those camels and people, and all of their stuff is just packed on the camels, and they're literally walking through the desert.
Yeah.
You're like, I have gone back in time.
Yeah.
That was kind of cool. Something. Yeah. But that was a successful mission for us. We went over, and I was kind of going somewhere a second ago. Well, that deployment, I went on that deployment knowing that was my last deployment.
Okay.
We got married.
Are you at the end of your 8 years?
I was,
or at the end of the active
I was past my 6. I had to extend my contract for another year to go on that deployment, and my wife and I agreed that this is going to be my last thing. But I couldn't not go. Like, these were my guys.
Mm-hmm. So you kind of raised your hand for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I was definitely going. I mean, those were my brothers going.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and you're just not gonna bail on that and be able to look yourself in the mirror for the rest of your life, especially if it goes south.
Okay.
So, because the military is funny. It's like, as a team leader, you get a new guy on your team, let's say 2009, I get a new guy on my team. In 2012, he's leaving. For 3 years, he's been putting a uniform on. I've been his leader. Like he's learning from me. And then if I was to be like, all right, guys, have great deployment. Like,
have fun. Good luck out there.
Can't do that. Like that's your kid at that point, you know? And it doesn't help that one of the guys on my team was like a $125 soaking wet. And just like, he just looks like a little kid.
Right. He looks like he needs
you.
He
still looks like a little kid, but now he's a sergeant first class in the Army. I mean, he's a dude's an animal, like, but he was just this little fella, and I felt like can't let him go alone.
Right.
You know? So we went on that knowing I'm going to go and then get out when I come home. And that's what we did. So we were in Kandahar. Kandahar is the birthplace of the Taliban.
Oh boy, that sounds like fun.
Well, it's good to have a thing, you know, a mantra.
That's what we're known for.
Right. We had a mantra. Trying to put this correctly. So we got in a gunfight. We carried a lot of guns with us, obviously. Well, you would think obviously, but we carried some stuff that I think units prior to us didn't necessarily like they wouldn't take as heavy of equipment as we would carry because we weren't going to not bring these guns. So, you know, like I mentioned earlier, buddy shooting a 50 cal rifle.
Yes.
You know, that's being shot at you from very far away because it's loud.
Yeah.
And we took some heavy machine guns that, not heavy machine gun, but the 240s it's a bigger caliber machine gun. They're freaking heavy. Nobody wants to carry that crap, but when you need it, you're really glad you had it, right? So we got in a gunfight and had all this stuff, and we had mortars with us too, and they weren't expecting that because we'd been dropped off by helicopter, so I think they thought these guys are carrying, you know, their little M4s or whatever.
And this is a decision you make autonomously or as a group?
As a company,
like, yes,
this is the minimum standard we're going to carry. This is the minimum combat load we're going to carry. Okay. I mean, the military puts out what they put out, but minimum standards are not good. Like,
right.
if the combat load was 7 magazines, like you got to have 7 magazines. Well, that's all well and good until you run through 7 magazines. So I'm carrying 12 all the time. Right.
Okay.
Like,
so you guys came with more than your predecessors, it sounds like.
Well, we went into the fight with more.
Okay.
It's not like we brought it from home. It's just
Understood.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there's things that you might elect to leave back at the main base and things that you wouldn't. So when we got in this fight, and it was our first big gunfight we were in, and you know we threw lead back at them pretty hard, and we had mortars shooting, we had 50 cal rifle in the mix. We had a bunch of 240s laying down lead, and then everybody else with their rifles and squad automatic weapons. And so we returned fire aggressively, to put it lightly. And then we got word through the interpreters or through different channels after the fact that, you know, because these guys are communicating with each other, but we got intelligence that like it was kind of a transcript of what they were saying to each other. And when we left, they said the heavy infidels had left, meaning, well, like that's what because we hit them hard, so they called us the heavy infidels. So now we got shirts made. Like hell yeah, like I've got a brand. Thank you. Like it was a badge of honor. Like they were not ready for that. So, we had good leadership on that deployment. We went through some, it's combat, so you're gonna have. You're gonna see stuff, right?
I would imagine
we had our worst day was our sister platoon was out. I was on the combat outpost. We had just come in from a mission where we were patrolling a village, and we heard it and then get a call that one of our sister platoons had just got hit by an IED. An improvised explosive device.
Yep.
I'm speaking English.
Thank
a
you.
roadside bomb. We're traveling up a wadi. You know what a wadi is?
No.
It's like a river basin basically, but during the dry season it's dry and you can drive up and down them. And there was theoretically a road, but it was at that point it was considered a black route because it hadn't been cleared by any of the engineers that do route clearance. And by the way, if infantry sounds like something that is not for the faint of heart, being a roadside bomb guy, the route clearance dudes who signed up to be engineers and then end up being the guys clearing bombs off the side of the road, that job sucks. And those guys are heroes. The guys that were there while we were there that would clear routes for us, I think they lost 8 people.
So
while
those
we were
guys,
there.
are those the guys that go in and try and find which wire to snip, if you will? How does that work?
I mean, for the most part, it's mounted. They're in trucks. There's a truck that's got a big crane on it, basically, and they can do a lot of things. Or, there's different ways of going about it. But the big thing is they find it, right? Like, if I find it, I'll blow it up if you give me the right equipment.
Kind of what I'm thinking. You just detonate.
It's the finding it that's hard. So, like,
are they buried? Are they hidden? Is it camouflage?
It's always changing, right? It's a game of chess with the IEDs and the U.S. technology. So, you had, let's say, Iraq. There was pressure plates. So you drive over it and it blows up, right? Okay, well, how do we take care of that? Well, we'll add a mine roller to the front. So it'll hit the pressure plate. How long is the mine roller, says the Taliban? Well, it's about 12 feet. So we're going to put a pressure plate here, but the bomb 12 feet back.
Oh, yes.
So it's an always changing thing, right? Okay, now we're using something that detects heat, and it recognizes the heat signature of your truck's motor. And as soon as you're here, it's shooting a bomb through the side of your truck, right? So now we got to put shields on the side of the truck, not just the bottom. And then now we got to put this big arm on the front that's got this heat block, so that it's just an always changing. What is their tactic now? How do they respond to what our tactic is? And it's an always changing thing. So you have to be prepared for all these different things. And so, like, my truck had a mine roller on the front, which it was my poor driver, like that. You can't see out of those trucks anyway, and like that thing's 15 feet in front of your truck. It's like driving a semi-truck while pushing a car and having to push the car where it goes. So,
oh my gosh,
it was pretty intense. And anyway, so the route clearance guys, they've got different technology, they've got different trucks that they're going to use to try and find all of these things and to clear a route so that we can go and accomplish the mission.
What color is a clear route? You said it's a black route.
Green.
Okay, and green if it's clear.
Yeah, you want a green route.
How long does it stay green?
I don't remember, man.
A day?
That would have been a decade ago. But I want to.
Like if I clear
probably like a week. I don't know.
Okay.
It might change depending on the area. Okay. Like if there's a highly concentrated area where activity keeps happening,
you're going to be a little more alert to it.
Yeah. I mean, they might have different standards. I don't actually know how. That was above my pay grade.
Fair.
Right? So anyway, the route clearance guys, like we would take them with us sometimes, depending on what the mission was and where we had to go. But they took some heavy casualties. We had a trip where we were running some supplies up to a special forces camp north of us, and which was a crap detail and not the kind of, like, I don't want to be here to escort stuff. Like, that sucks. Right. That's just not the job I want. But going back to whether it's good deployment or bad deployment, like, your job as a soldier is not to pick and choose your mission. Like, your job is to do whatever you were ordered to do, including
escort the stuff.
Yeah,
this time,
or be a security detail for some politician who's going to meet with, like, that was Iraq. I did a lot of those personnel security detail things, and it's like, these are such a waste of my time.
Well, so you were talking about going up this dry riverbed, though, before we started talking about the route clearance guys.
Yeah, so
where were we going?
That was the May 20th, 2011. There was one of the trucks got hit. It was the truck that didn't have the mine roller, and so the mine roller's up front. One of the other trucks kind of went off the route a little bit, hit a pressure plate, blew up the truck, flipped it over. And these trucks it's a semi-truck with armor on it. They're not light. I flipped it over. The guy in the turret, Eric Lund, he's from the west side of the state. He was in the gun turret. Gun turret has a shield on it. The shield severed his arms. He's a double amputee in the arms, which there's not a lot of, because if you think about it, like, if you're going to lose your arms, most of the time losing your head too. But he lived, which was a miracle. The truck got hit. It's flipped. There's chaos on the ground, obviously, at that moment. They started getting hit with small arms fire from the hills because it's this wadi is through through the mountains. Again, very intense terrain. So they start getting hit with small arms fire, machine gun fire from the hills. So you've got priorities of work at that point. Like, we have to suppress the enemy and we have to take care of the wounded. And so they're calling for medevac. Anyway, these guys are not far from where we were on our little outpost. So we spun up some trucks and sent them to assist. And one of our trucks got hit as well. And that was, half of my team was in that truck. I was not in that truck.
Hidden bombs or whatever?
By another
IEDs?
one. Yeah. So it was a complex attack with multiple IEDs and, machine gunners ready for, like, that's how they would do it. It was a complex attack. It's like, you get hit, you get immobilized, and then they try and take advantage of you being stuck. There was 10 guys got medevaced out that day. I don't know, everything happens for a reason. And I had my stuff on still because we had just come back from a mission. We just walked back, and my platoon sergeant, George, he basically threw me out of my truck because we were all running the truck. He's like, no, you stay here and make sure that we don't get hit here. Because, again, you're on a little outpost. We just sent 10 guys out. That leaves us with 5 left here or whatever it was on that, that day. So there's 5 Americans in okay. And they already kicked off right there. This could be something bigger. They might be coming over on this little base. We'd already had the main base that we were on get infiltrated where that was an attack where they shot at the helicopters that were coming to pick us up, shot rockets at them. And then they breached the wire and they were able to start throwing hand grenades into the bunkers where people were hiding. Our radio operator killed 2 guys that night, a radio operator who had no business being, at least, he was very capable of that job, but that's not the job he signed up for. Right. But it was, here we are, we're under attack and we're being infiltrated. So we just, you don't know exactly what the enemy has planned. Right. So, I had some of my team that was still on the base, some of my team in trucks heading out, and then they got hit. The little guy I referenced before, the 120 pounder, he was in that truck. He got hit. My assistant team leader was in that truck, who was just he was a bodybuilder type guy, just a gym rat. I messed with him for a while. It took him a while to come back from that. It seems like he's doing well now, but it was a long journey. Eric lost his arms, Eric Lund. That was actually, I don't know how to describe the admiration I have for him and the journey that he's been through. I don't know if I have the strength to come through what he's come through. He had hooks for a long time, and then a few years ago, they did a double arm transplant. Really? Did you know there's a thing as a double arm transplant?
No. Oh, medical science is amazing. Yeah. Full arms.
Full arms.
Hold on. But I might have to have him as a guest. Are both arms from the same donor?
That's my assumption, but I don't actually know. We would joke maybe you get some arms with some tattoos or something.
Yeah, or you could get two non-matching arms.
Right.
A really strong arm and a very dainty arm. The rabbit trail I did not expect to go down with you today. When did he get this done?
I want to say that was 2018.
So it's been a minute.
In a few years.
And you're still friends with him.
It's still a journey for him. It takes, if I remember correctly, and I could be totally making this up, but if I remember correctly, from the nerve, it takes basically, years for the nerve endings to start actually reconnecting with your brain. So he's got arms that he's had for a few years, but a lot of what he does is this kind of thing where he's, just using, because he doesn't have the motor skills, right?
Fine motor articulation. Takes a minute.
That's what I was going to say.
I knew it. I pulled that out of your brain.
That was huge. But he's got a service dog that helps him out. He's got obviously community support. They built him an adapted house so that he could function properly. But his journey's just been something I can't imagine, you know.
I wrote this thing down a little while ago while you were talking, and you're kind of circling it. All of the stories you're talking about, did it fuck you up?
I mean, aren't we all?
It's
right?
yeah. For the baseline, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you touched on it a minute ago when you said you don't know if you would have the strength to go through what he's gone through.
I mean, no one does until they're in that, right?
And I'm sitting here listening to you talk, thinking like all of my drama and baggage, and believe me, I believe I have a lot. Feels like joke material compared to the stories you're telling.
Well, I can tell you, I understand, and I have a heart for veterans because obviously, as I am one, I've seen guys that I'm in a complicated situation, I guess, because here's the thing: like in my job, my consistent message and what I want to put out there, which is true, is that, like, for again, going back to, I'm a lender, you're a realtor.
Yeah.
I want realtors to understand that the average VA buyer is like who they want to work with, and they don't need your sympathy and they don't need your charity. They just need you to look at their approval like it's as good as conventional, because it is, because they are, on average, some of the best buyers you're ever going to deal with.
We can absolutely take the moment to talk about how a VA loan is actually, in many cases, a better performing loan than a conventional buyer.
It is I think there's a problem that's been created by how good the VA loan actually is as a product, because it's super flexible. So theoretically, someone who doesn't qualify very well can get a VA loan.
Okay.
And I think people think that that's most people on a VA loan. It's actually not. It's the real minority. Most VA home buyers are, 720 something credit, money in the bank that they don't actually need, and job stability.
Can I venture
less debt, because we don't have, like, I went to college. I don't have student loans because you pay your taxes and your tax money paid for my education. So thank you very much. But if you have another Eric who makes the same money as I have and has the same credit score, I'm going to qualify better because I have less debt.
Well, I would I would posit that your competition, like other VA lenders, actually suck.
Sure.
Like,
and
there's a huge, can we take a PSA moment and warn all the other realtors out there that some of the largest, most well-marketed, air quotes, veteran-friendly lenders are actually just marketing machines that don't deliver a great product.
Yes.
And it's unfortunate. Because the veteran
the
buyer,
product itself, like the loan program itself, is awesome.
Yes.
But it has to function properly. And so, and I'm not in the business of, like, hey, I'm out here to bash other lenders.
No.
But I am in the business of changing the perception of the VA loan
and
in
educate
your community
the people.
and mine.
Absolutely.
And that's why we started the Veteran Lending Council. That's why we're training loan officers and having them go through our course so they can go back to their company and perform better.
Still do. So Eric and I have known each other for a few years, and there used to be the military mortgage boot camp. Is that still a thing, or is that like old branding for a better product? That's a product that's
old branding,
better.
different personnel, and a very different product.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, because what we've done with the Veteran Lending Council is it's different personnel.
Okay.
You know Alex Jimenez.
Yes,
from
AJ.
in Tennessee. So
Love him.
he's one of the founders. Fisher's one of the founders, and he's the president.
Yep.
You might know Jason Steyer out of Texas.
I do.
And you probably know Brad Stinson out of Grand Rapids. Well,
maybe.
link up with them. And there's
Brad
so there's guys from companies all over the country that have come together, put together a training plan. We've got, at this point, probably 12 hours of digital content with testing. I mean, it's a certification. We are giving a certification, and we're a year into it, so it's not like it's, a renowned certification at this point. But
I would say
screw the certification. If you can do the loan better, there's nobody that's gone through that. We've got people that do, been 20 years in this business and been writing loans for forever with, a lot of VA, and they come through that course and they're like, I learned stuff I had no idea.
Yeah, it's a good product done correctly.
Yeah. And what we're trying to get these loan officers to do is to help change the perception of VA by executing their craft properly.
There it is.
And also to get out there like I do and and train real estate agents.
Yeah.
And again,
A lot of the old guard in my industry has false perceptions about a VA loan.
yeah. And a lot of the perceptions, like you alluded to, it's not the VA loan. It is the lenders in the space of VA. Because you really have two main problems, right? You have call centers who market really well.
Market really well.
Really well.
Yes.
And then don't perform, right? They don't know how to think outside the box. They don't, they just, there's a real difference from a loan officer's perspective, right? If I'm 100% commission, referral based only, I better perform or I will go broke and my kids will starve and I will be mowing lawns for a living, which
But you're really good
I
at
might
it.
actually be okay with. But the call center setting, you're just not going to have the same type of tempo because they're not, who's incentivized, right?
The call center employee is not generally trained or knows how to think about the nuances that come up in every mortgage. There's always something.
I've dealt with I have a friend who was one of those loan officers. I have several actually. And at one point, like we bumped into each other a couple years ago. He's like, we're doing the same thing. And I'm like, no, we're not. And he's like, I went into some of the scenarios that I see where people are about to be homeless. And like this rebuttal was like, no, man, like you don't understand. They train us so well. It's like they train you how to sell. That is different from knowing the guidelines. Like I know the guidelines.
Yes.
And if I don't know the guideline or if there's a gray area, which there's a lot of gray area in VA, which is one of the great things. The problem is, the VA is created with gray area so that lenders can make good informed decisions. But if you don't have lenders, if you don't have companies that trust their underwriters, then what those companies do is they put on overlays. Right?
This is what I was flirting with.
Those overlays get trained. They get trained to these loan officers
as
like
their
guidelines,
yes.
but they're not. So somebody calls, a big box lender in Texas and then gets denied and is told, you don't qualify because you have a 600 credit score. Well, what's the VA minimum credit score? There isn't one. They don't have one. The lender puts on that 640 or 620. Yeah, and I have no problem with that. I have a problem with the messaging they're conveying.
Well, there's that omission of you. They're told you don't qualify, not you don't qualify with us.
Right.
And there's a distinction.
Right. So, there's occasionally a loan that I might not be able to do. I don't work in mid 500 credit scores. That's just not what our company has chose to do. But I won't deny somebody and say you can't get a VA loan.
Right.
I'm actually probably going to try and help them with their credit score because I think that is the better route. But if not, if there's an emergency and you need to buy a house now,
you know where to send them.
Because you're going to be homeless. Of course I know where to send them,
yeah,
right? Like there is an option and this is how it goes, right? Like
changing the whole landscape of how real estate is done. I love it.
Well, so that's one of the two. And the other issue, so outside of these call centers that do a bad job and then people think that's the VA, there's also local lenders. Now we're in a county with great local lenders. Like I've worked with half of them.
Abundance of great local lenders.
I've literally worked with half of them, like in my own office, right? Like
yes.
these are friends of mine. So I'm not bashing local lenders. But what I will say is, nationwide, the problem is you've got a good local lender who is your go-to realtor, and let's say you're an average realtor who does 6 transactions in a year, right?
God, and I'm so above average.
I know you are, but that's why I said let's say. So let's say you're that local lender that does, or that local realtor who does 6, and then that average, let's say he does 100 transactions. He or she does 100 transactions. Statistically, he's going to do 5 VA in a year. And I'm not knocking that. I'm pointing out an obvious thing. Like guidelines are perishable skills, right?
Yes,
if you aren't familiar with it,
I'm stealing
if you're not involved in it and monitoring the changes, like I'm a guy who focuses entirely on VA. Now I can do other things, and I can do a conventional loan. I did an FHA loan, but that was the first time in like 2 years I've done an FHA loan this year. But point is, I'm like deep in the VA, and I feel like what we've created for a course like should be required for people who want to write VA loans, because you got to know where to look for help. Like there's gray area. You need to be able, as a loan officer, identify when your underwriting team is wrong. Like I've helped some of these big lenders because I'll call the VA and say, hey, look, somebody's about to get, the realtor calls me and say, hey, I've got so-and-so. I couldn't get them to call you because they like their insurance company they've been with for 10 years.
Oh, yes. Oh,
And
they're
I'm
the
like,
worst.
And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. What's the problem? Well, we're supposed to close next week, but they're about to deny the loan because of X. I'm like, well, that is wrong. They're like, well, I know. Can you take the deal? I'm like, well, you're supposed to close next week. How about this? And I call the VA, and I get the VA to email me a guideline if it's something that's not black and white in the guideline. Otherwise, I'll just give you the guideline. But if it's a gray area and you need a decision from the VA itself, like interpreting the guideline, you reach out and call them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not hard.
But they don't
You
know.
can do it. Like, I can do it. You can do it. But most lenders don't. They're not going to call the regional loan center. They don't even know to do it.
They don't know to do it. They don't know how to ask the question. They don't even know that they can ask the question.
Yeah. Which a lot of lenders, and I'm good with this, they just call me now. Right?
Yeah,
Like,
you're the expert. You got the brain space.
And I'm fine with that. But it's just it's a problem that is there, right?
So,
like, just like if you're getting somebody who wants to do, let's say, down payment assistance in Brighton, don't call me.
Right.
Like, I will tell you that. You call me with that referral, I'm going to say, I think Amanda Webb does a lot of those.
So the parallel in my world is like a commercial building. I can do it. It requires me to slow down and do things that I wouldn't naturally do well.
Yeah.
I can do it,
Yeah.
but I might not be the best person for you right now, depending on your circumstance.
Yeah.
But.
Well, anyway, that's kind of the.
So I'm going to drag you back.
Let's go back.
Because I'm not sure how we got here.
Well,
but I'm glad we did.
I was talking about being empathetic to people's situations regarding
we
are they
started.
messed up?
Did it
Right.
fuck you up? And yeah. So how do you end up? How do you go? And I shouldn't say end up because that's kind of a loaded piece of language. But how do you go from being a guy in war who wants to be a soldier, which is a word nobody uses? I love that you were like, I wanted to be a soldier, to being a loan originator. How'd you get there?
Well, I like personal finance. My brother sent me a Dave Ramsey book when I was in Iraq.
Dave
I started
Ramsey.
making my
Hot topic.
yeah, he is, and he's
Polarizing figure.
he is very polarizing. I'm just saying that was my intro to finance.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think he's a great intro to finance. I don't think he's a stopping point for
Right.
finance.
It's a
but
piece of the
that is
puzzle.
definitely what got me in the mindset of personal finance is something that everyone needs to know and clearly does not. So like I would make my soldiers read it. Like, you're going to read Total Money Makeover. Like, do it. Like, because you got, you get these kids going overseas and they're making $30,000 for the year they're there, and they come home, and while they were in Iraq, they signed up for a new Mustang and a new Harley. It's like, well, you just bought $90,000 worth of vehicles, and you don't have a job lined up for when you come home. So how's that going to work?
Yeah.
Right? Like, the soldiers get taken advantage of, for sure, and just people in general just don't. They don't get the right education.
Financial
at the right
education
time,
is
right?
not
There's
a strength of our nation.
No, there's a huge gap there. And we're culturally incentivized to spend
Yes.
and make the wrong decisions.
Oh, yes.
And we're
I have a
marketed to
closet
it such
full
a
of
way that. Yeah, like, anyway. So I liked his stuff. I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but again, like going back to my last deployment, I knew I was going to come back, finish school, and find something else. And so I'd listen to Dave Ramsey's radio show.
Where'd you go to school?
I got an associate's at Washington, and then a bachelor's at Eastern.
Okay.
And I got into their master's program, and then I'm like, no, I got a job.
Yeah.
Don't need this. Because I hate school.
Yeah.
It was painful to go to school as a adult who just came back from war.
That's, I think, like coming back from war and having to go to school has got to be.
It's that Adam Sandler meme where he's in the kindergarten desk and you're like, oh, your life is hard. Like, let's talk about your hard. Because
Yeah.
I got buddies in the hospital still.
Yeah.
But sure. Anyway, so I finished school and was looking for, I didn't really know what it would be, actually. And it got to a point where I was actually kind of nervous. God opens and closes doors for people. That's my belief. I've lived through enough stuff that I can tell you a few more stories that it's like there's no doubt in my mind that like I'm not alive because of my skill sets. Like I've made it through my stupidity and then some.
Is there one story that sticks out above?
I mean, there's
others?
a couple. There's like, I mean, just the fact that Eric Lund is alive, quite frankly, is a miracle. And the other guys that got hurt on that day and the combat that we made it through, the guy that I'll give you three real quick.
Yeah.
They're just top of mind.
Do it.
We had a mission where we cordoned off a village, and my platoon was in charge of the cordon, so we're making sure people are not coming in and out without us knowing. And then the other platoon was doing the search of the village. And I'm at the front gate with two of my guys. And we run our mission and all that. We get back to base, and then somebody tells us there was a guy, and we got the intel, but they didn't have it in time, coming to blow you up. He was on a motorcycle, rigged to blow up, and he blew up on the way. So his goal was to get to me and blow himself up. That's how they operate. It's hard to fight people that want to die.
Yes.
And so anyway, he blew himself up accidentally on his way. Yay. So
the likelihood of that is not
not
probably
good.
very high.
The likelihood of the guy, there was a bomb making factory that we found. I say factory and you think factory. It's bomb making hut we found. But it had a door.
Like a
It was a
meth lab
it was a
only for
building.
bombs?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So, and they were gonna kick down the door. The team was gonna kick down the door. One of the guys gets stung by a bee. He's the only guy to get stung by a bee over the year that we were there, out of 100 people. And it stopped. It caused him to pause, and somebody else looked up during that pause and saw that door was rigged to blow up. So if he hadn't got stung by a bee, those 4 guys probably would have died. We got moved in at night one time to a village or to a hilltop, dropped off. We move into this hilltop, get positions on this village, and sun comes up, and the guy realizes that he is on a bomb, and it just didn't go off. But he's like sitting on the pressure plate. It just didn't work.
You can't get off.
Well, no,
Can you get off of it?
Yeah. He'd been moving around. Like it just didn't. It malfunctioned.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
We got delayed. We were in trucks. We were going up one of the routes that I've actually already mentioned that was often a problem. But we were heading north to do an oversight for some guys coming back. We were going to watch the route and make sure no one planted any bombs. But we got delayed from our SP, our start, by about 15 minutes. And when we eventually go, as we're going up, it's nighttime. I had a thermal camera in my truck with a screen that I could see, and there was a heat signature that we were able to see in the road. And like, there's a disturbance in the road, and I'm the lead truck, so we stop. We're looking at it, and it was a half buried. Two big canisters of homemade explosives. So a guy was planting a bomb for us. If we would have been 15 minutes later, it would have been in. If we would have been 15 minutes earlier, we would have gone by him, and he would have got us on the way back. Mm-hmm. But we just happened to have the right time to prevent him from being able to finish the job. And then he scattered, and then we were able to find where he cached a whole bunch of other explosives. So it's like, I don't believe in coincidence. There are too many things that in my life, God has just had his hand on my life.
Does this make you more fearless or more skittish?
In that point, I mean, at that point in my life, like it did get to a point where you kind of felt invincible. Like when I'm up, and so I'll just move forward. Everybody who's in combat kind of deals with that. Like, you have to, in order to be able to function over there, you have to be comfortable with some of the end results that could take place.
For
obviously,
sure.
right? Like, my first platoon sergeant was killed in Afghanistan, while I was
bracelet?
there. Yeah, while I was in Iraq, again, I'd volunteered to go to Iraq. A bunch of other guys had volunteered to go to Iraq. But our platoon sergeant from the unit we had left also volunteered to go to Afghanistan at the same time. And while we were in Iraq, he was killed in Afghanistan. So, I mean, it's not like we didn't know realities of war,
Yes.
right? Like you go and you just have to you have to be comfortable with.
But knowing
the possible
something in your
outcomes.
brain is different than actually
Yeah.
taking action in that space.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when it comes back to your question,
Did it fuck you up is the question.
I think there's some chemical things that take place for, like when you're in these high, high stress, high anxiety, adrenaline pumping.
I was going to say adrenal overload.
You get they'll teach you. You're gonna get tunnel vision, right? And you have to fight that. Like your brain is literally going to make you focus on one thing, and that could kill you because you won't see what else is going on the battlefield. So you have to get used to that. You have to be able to overcompensate or like fight back against that.
Right. Control it or prevent it or know it's happening at least.
Yeah, but like the longer that you're in that environment, the less it impacts you because you just become acclimated to it. And then you come home and you're like, well.
So there's my question. What carryover?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's different for everyone. So for me,
I only care about how it is for you.
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Unless it's enough,
No, it's fine.
Okay.
I had, I think I deal. I mean, there's just some things that are just going to be trained different, and so I'm going to be different than other people because of my background, which I would say is no different than if you were a shoemaker for 30 years. There's going to be things that you look at differently, right? Like it's just part of the job. Your experiences determine some of who you are. So things like when I'm in a restaurant, I don't want people behind me. When I'm in public, I'm not going to be comfortable. I never will. But it's because I like to know what's going on. It's not that I can't. It's just that I'm more comfortable, right?
Sure.
Like that's a thing. Do I startle quickly or something like that? Like maybe, but I don't have like flashbacks where I'm like trying to dig a hole and get away from something. You know what I mean?
Well,
like there are people that have that,
and there are stories about soldiers with I don't know, fighting in their sleep, or do you perimeter your house with a firearm every night?
No,
I don't know.
No, I don't. It's part of why, you come back as an infantry guy and everybody's like, well, are you going to be a cop now? Because they carry guns too, right? It's like, no, I don't want to be a cop. And the reason I didn't want to be a cop, because a lot of military they go to law enforcement, and that just I never had an interest in that, because when you're in a combat zone, you can't even help it, but you start to think. I mean, you have to be thinking everyone's the enemy, right? Because everyone could be the enemy.
Yeah.
You don't know, and in an insurgency, that's the whole point, is they blend in with the population. So everyone you're dealing with could be rigged to blow up. And I didn't want to be a cop and have to think about people like that.
Yeah. So
even though maybe you should to a degree.
To a degree. So
but I just don't want to live in that space all the time.
Okay. So that answers my next question, which was going to be along those lines. Like, do you find yourself distrusting your fellow man, humanity in general?
No, I don't. I don't think more than most.
Okay.
I mean, I think I'm much more abrupt than most people in terms of how I'm going to. I don't sugarcoat things. I'm very honest in my assessment and approach.
These are some of my favorite things about you.
Unapologetic when I have all of the things that make a bad salesman, right? Like I don't want to kiss anybody's butt or tell you that the dumb things that you've done aren't dumb.
Yeah.
When they are dumb, like sometimes I think people need that truth, right? Yes. Like I deal in people's finances and I love personal finance, and like I want people to win. And when I see you doing something stupid, like having a $900 Mercedes payment when you make $36,000 a year, I'm going to tell you that is crippling you and you made a dumb choice. Yes. And when you tell me like you needed it, like I'm going to call you and say, no, you didn't. No, you made a choice.
Definitely should have been a BMW, not a Mercedes.
Well,
I'm kidding.
Again, $36,000 a year. That's a pretty big chunk of your life when it's a $900 Mercedes payment. So I enjoy these conversations with people. I actually do like talking about what it is I do for a living, which is good. I don't actually like mortgages so much, but I like the personal finance side. I like the stuff we get to talk about up front, but I think it's because I don't pander. Like, I just like being able to look at things and assess them and tell you, here's where you're at. And if you want to get here, here's the steps to take. And if you want to get here, here's the steps to take.
And you help people win. You
Yeah.
get people to a position where they can win.
And like, you know, I've had people, I had somebody a couple months ago, and I was kind of a slump where I had just dealt with a bunch of people that were like the soul-sucking people, where like they just want all of your time and attention and energy, and you're just like, ugh. Like, because there are those people where you just don't even want them in your life, but sometimes they need you, and so you stay and whatever. And I just had a rough week of people giving me their excuses, and just anyway, this lady calls me, and she was like, "Hey, you probably don't remember us, but we talked to you 3 years ago, and I don't know if we're gonna look to buy. We might be looking to buy because we might sell our house, but I just wanted you to know that we might be calling, and also tell you that we are in such a better financial position because of the conversation we had with you 3 years ago." And like that, to me, like, yeah, that's what I want to be doing. Like, I want to help people. And like that was a huge win. I never did a transaction for this lady, but I gave her good advice, and it changed, you know, the course they were on.
And you gave her good advice in a way that she heard and implemented. Yeah. That's something.
Right. So anyway, going back to,
Did it fuck you up?
So no, but it did change me, right? And there's some things I deal with. You know, I went to therapy for a bit to see if I could get my mind right. Like, I didn't feel the same. I didn't feel as sharp. I was cloudy.
Did the therapy help? And
no.
Thank you for saying out loud that you tried it.
Yeah, sure. Well, sure. I mean, I think if you need help, go get help. Yeah. It didn't help me. I'll just say that.
Interesting.
I can go into why in a second, but I prior, like when I was back from deployment, new marriage, new environment.
How old are you at this part in the story?
Probably 24.
All right, 25. So you're mid-20s too. You're still young.
Probably 25. You know, sorry about that.
That's all right. I want to know who it is.
Leave me alone. Yeah, 25 years old. I'm in college, just come back from all this combat, and now I'm trying to like figure it out. And I don't think I personally struggle with this aspect, but I'm going to just mention it because I think it's important. I think a lot of the reasons that veterans have trouble acclimating to society is that they are so regimented and disciplined because they're told where to be and what to wear and what to do. Mm-hmm. And then they come back and they're like, now what do I do and what do I wear and where do I go? Yeah. Right. And you're also a part of something so much bigger than you. If you know, like whether you agree with the mission or not, you're on the team. And to be a part of a team and then all of a sudden you're solo, of course guys have trouble, right? Like and like from our perspective, like as a National Guard guy getting out, or let's say, you know, you end your contract on your deployment expires and then you ETS immediately after.
What is ETS?
Your ETS is your date of separation from the service. Enlistment termination or something. I don't remember.
You know,
I forget all the acronyms,
sure.
man.
Acronyms
it's been
are
a long time.
The worst.
Well, and I have some memory problems. But anyway, you know, these guys come out and then, you know, you look at our deployment, it was
expiration term of service.
Bam. So we were, that's the one that everyone always talks about. I can't wait to ETS. You know, you come back like from legit combat and then, you know, 10 days later, you're sitting by a pool trying to relax. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to relax really? Like,
abrupt.
It's really abrupt. And like at least World War II, and I'm not making a comparison. God, no. Right? Like,
I have an inappropriate comparison coming up, so run with it.
Okay.
World War II.
Okay. But those guys, they got on a boat and came back, and it took time.
It's like your commute home after
got to decompress.
Work. If you had a 45-minute drive, you can kind of shed all the work stuff.
You come back from combat, and it's like, these guys come back. It's like, I'm in my military mindset. Like, if you don't think people talk different in the military, like just the way that they communicate, like, of course it's different. It's harsh. It's not going to be perceived well. Like, from a lot of leadership styles are just more like, go, execute. You're like, that doesn't necessarily go over well when you get home and you tell your spouse to go execute something, right? Or your kids, like my soldiers listened immediately. My kids listen never. And like, how do you handle that? Right. And not it's like, nuances. So adapting back to society is difficult. So I give a lot of slack to veterans. I think there are definitely those that like, they're going to be the peaked in high school people. I joined the military and that's what I'm going to talk about for the rest of my life. And that's like no vision past that. I think a huge problem with, adjustment in general is that people don't find a new mission. If you don't find a new mission, you're going to be that alcoholic that doesn't get out of bed in the morning. Like, and if you get a rating with the VA because you've got such bad PTSD and now they've enabled you to not go to work, like, I think we create a lot of the problems because we're not addressing it properly. Like, I get the compensation, but is it the right thing? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I totally.
So I don't know. I mean, again, keeping in mind my unique position is like, I'm a guy who's seen a lot of combat, and then, I also see people's financials where they're getting all this money from the VA and from, their medical retirement from their service, and they didn't, like, then I see their military resume and it's like, okay.
These two things don't go together?
But whatever. Like, again, I try and approach it from the only way that I could, because it used to bother me. And now it's like, listen, you don't know the whole story on anybody.
Ever.
And, like the military sexual trauma that takes place throughout the military. I'm not going to go into the degree of how big of a problem it is, but it is absolutely a problem that happens. So in my mind, like, you just never know, so just leave it alone. It's none of your business. Yeah. And I kind of have to go there.
And with so many things, military side, like in life, you really just don't know.
Absolutely. So, I went through a period of time that I had all this change going on, and I was trying to find this new direction. Didn't have the new mission. Fortunately, I'm solid in my faith and have a great family. My wife has a great family. I come from a great family. Like, my wife and I grew up in church together. We met when we were little kids. So we have community, and that is important. But at the same time, nobody is going to relate to me. Like, nobody. I've got 2 older brothers. They're not going to get it. Even guys that were in the service, if you weren't the guy I was with, then we're going to connect, but not the same.
So I was going to ask you about that, because you, being a veteran and dealing in a industry of veteran loans, do you connect with your clients?
Yeah, I do.
Would imagine they're
most.
More. Okay.
Most, not all. There are some, and I have the luxury of being a veteran who can say this, right? Like, without seeming like a schmuck. Like, not all veterans are great people.
Of course.
That's it. And I can say that. Like, I'm thankful for what they did. I'm thankful they were willing to sign on the dotted line. It doesn't necessarily mean they were a great person.
Stupid, like, civilian question. Is it appropriate when I see a veteran and they're clearly a veteran in public? I always want to say thank you for your service, but it also feels like how the millionth time they've probably heard that. And I'm just a little weenie who's like, I didn't do it.
I'm just one guy who can only answer for me.
Yeah, of course.
Because I can tell you with certainty.
Annoying. Is it annoying?
I don't find it annoying. Like, I think if you can recognize it, they're probably asking for it.
Is it
right?
lips? For
like,
sure.
To
Here's
a degree,
my giant
like,
hat with all my pins on it.
And there's a reason that I'm like wearing flag T-shirts and remember everyone deployed, and not just because it's important to remember everyone deployed, but it's also part of like the brand that I am. Yeah. But it took me a long time to even like bring up that I'm a veteran, because in business, because I didn't want my business to come from charity. Like, I don't need your charity.
I can totally see
this. You don't owe me. Like, I got paid for what I did. Matter of fact, I enjoyed what I did. Like, you don't owe me squat. I appreciate the sentiment, but like, that's not a reason to send me referrals.
So
right?
What does it feel like if I say thank you for your service?
That's fine. It's
a platitude.
Yeah, it's fine. If no one ever said it, that would be sad.
That
right?
would suck. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you definitely know the people that want like that. That's, again, they're the people that maybe that was the highlight of their life.
It becomes their identity.
Yeah.
Like,
And
this
it's
is
part of
how
mine.
to
It's part of everybody's.
Part of, but not.
But it's not who, it's
the
not
main
all
thing.
I am. That's for
Right.
sure. It's important to me. It's a part of what shaped who I am. It, you know, there are lasting impacts from that stuff, you know, from that time of my life that hopefully go away and or maybe won't, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm going back to connecting with like my people. You know, there's people that are like my generation or like that Air Force weather observer guy
Yes.
who like, dude, you're just a liar. You're
I
a
feel
schmuck.
like that's a real story.
Like, it is a real story.
It is. There's a guy
that
out
dude
there.
was a schmuck. And, you know,
It's got to be like, I wish I was somebody and I didn't.
it's sad for that.
something.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's who he is. And the guy that, anyway, moving past that guy. Point being, there's some definitely people that are just losers. Like, they're like, and I'm, whatever.
have to
You
know.
be you. If you're comfortable with that,
Right,
you be
but
you.
when you're
I
dealing with
guess.
those people, they have to know that you see behind the curtain because you're looking at documents that you know how to look at.
Yeah, and do you think I don't say it? Of
Yeah,
course I say it.
yeah,
You know?
right.
Like,
Well, good.
but a part of that is like, because you get other, you know, you'll get, and you know, like you deal with people. It's like there are people who they'll take everything they can get, and they'll act owed, and they'll ask for a discount even though they make $300,000 a year.
Yeah.
And you know, and you're like,
Yeah.
what do you want a discount for? Well, I'm a veteran. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
I
am
know.
I.
Right? Like, I mean, at the end of the so I don't know.
No, I
like,
get
I,
this.
I think I'm a unique veteran in some respects. Like, there's a lot of things that people will do to engage with the veteran community that I'm like, that is a turnoff to me.
Yeah,
like what you're
douchey.
trying to do to get to me, and it works for most veterans, but it doesn't work for me because I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Like, I just, you know, experiences experiences vary. I don't know that, but you know, I feel like there's not going to be a time in my life where people don't, especially because of the career choice that I've made and the type of business that I've built, that I won't veer from. Like, I love what I do. I like most of the veterans I get to work with it's an honor and a privilege, and it's I think therapeutic for me to be able to kind of like have those worlds merge a little bit in a positive way.
Yes.
Because a lot of, you know, like I don't know, like I've dealt with stuff. I went through periods of time where I definitely drank too much. I was having memory problems. I was driving to the wrong job sites. And, you know, that's just the mental cognitive problems. Like, we got some physical problems too. Like, my body hurts a little bit here and there, a fair amount actually. But I think it has helped. Like, I have a pretty stable life at this point, as relatively stable as it can be when you're in a straight commission job. But, you know, it's definitely more stable than it was 5 years ago. Right. And that has helped. I think I had, you know, if I just have too many things on my mind, and there are stressors that become more apt to show, I guess, or like there are symptoms that become like dreams.
Be
let's
specific.
say, like
you have bad dreams, or you have
sure.
no dreams.
Everybody
Yeah.
has bad dreams,
Of course.
right? And again, everybody has bad work-related dreams. So, like, I don't,
Yes.
I have no problem with the PTSD thing. Like, I know I fit in that box and have some elements of PTSD, of course. Like, I'm always a little, you know, wired a little tighter than most people, and things like having dreams. But again, I'd hate to, I don't want a crutch of being like, I have PTSD. It's like, doesn't the librarian ever have bad dreams about the library? Like, is that PTSD? You know what I mean?
Where's the line?
But,
well,
you know, when
keep in mind, as a culture, we like to make everything a disorder. It can't just be like, you know, your experience.
I call it a symptom of work, right?
Yeah.
Like, I had this job and now I have some stuff that's still there. Now it is different. Like, there's some different stress, like your rewiring of your brain that goes on with high stress situations and trauma and things like that. Like, so, I don't know, like I've had dreams where I'm in a gunfight with my wife, or where my dad's driving down the road and he gets blown up. or shortly after our second child was born, I had a dream where her face was blown off. Like, it's just things that it's a merger of the two worlds.
Yeah. And that is a dream that I'm unlikely to have because I've never been in a situation where anything blew up.
It's not a great way to start your day, right? But you have to start your day nonetheless. But it's just, and those things are you know, they're not as common now. But you know, I know Vietnam guys that have had the same reoccurring dream for 50 years. So like,
I have a question though. What helped? Like, what is your processing mechanism?
I don't know. Time marches on, and you just.
But the Vietnam guy you were just talking
didn't
about
work for him. Yeah, I don't know. And I've told that, like, I told that guy to go to see therapy.
Talk to somebody.
Yeah, I mean,
Journaling.
I'm gonna speak out of my. Like, this is not my wheelhouse, obviously. But my experience with the VA was they wanted to focus on like one day, like what is the one thing that you could have done different. And in my mind, I felt like their therapy was geared towards people who were victims of circumstance. And we weren't. Like, I was not a victim. I understand, and like, statistically more non-combat arms people have post-traumatic stress diagnosis than combat arms guys as a percentage. Which kind of makes sense because let's say you were a supply guy.
Feel less in control. You're trained.
Well, I think they were just never put themselves mentally in that. Like,
right.
I can tell you that, like, the training matters. We took out the guy that got my guys. Myself.
The roadside guy?
Yeah. The bomb maker.
Yeah.
And his buddy. It was a big deal. He was one of the top 5 most wanted guys in southern Afghanistan at the time, and we took him out. And that was the first time that, like, I had a close, because it was close. It was an ambush, and it was very up close and personal. And I remember being alarmed after, like, why don't I feel like something significant just went down? But I didn't feel like something significant. Like, it was because you train that. Like, that's literally all you train to do is that kind of scenario.
Yeah. And
so you just wired it in, and, like, it wasn't a big deal. It's a big deal, right? Like, it's a monumental deal. What kind of psychopath are you, right? Like, but if you're a, you know, let's say a support guy who's a mechanic, and then you get blown up en route to go help somebody, you know, fix their vehicle that broke down or whatever, that I think you're more inclined to have some alarming responses to that, because you just weren't mentally ever thinking that could happen, or maybe you knew it could, but it wasn't probable, right?
Right.
So when I went to the VA and they kept trying to focus on, like, what could you do different? I'm like, you don't seem to understand. Like, we are not victims. Nothing, like, we went to war.
Nothing happened to me.
Yeah. Like, and that's how I felt. Like, I can't, I wouldn't change. Obviously, I don't want what happened to happen, but, like, that is what happens. Like, war is hell. Like, I didn't want anyone to get it blown up. But that is what we expected.
Yeah, it
like,
sounds like
it's not unusual.
You have a perspective about your life of, like, responsibility. Like, you have responsibility, so you have the power. You know what I mean? It's a place to sit in, like, your point of view about how your life unfolds. I think if you've said multiple times, I'm not a victim.
No.
That speaks volumes about how you would interpret so many of the things that happened around you.
Well, good parents, personal responsibility, and all.
Yeah, good job, Mom and Dad.
Yeah. So I don't know.
What helped?
I think just time. I think time for me has helped. I think pursuing a different passion helped. I've enjoyed building my career up to this point. I've enjoyed, this is the veteran mortgage advisor arm of what we've done now. Yeah. And
do you want to plug that? Like, who can?
Yeah.
Who needs the training? Other officers and realtors?
For realtors, we'll come out and we'll teach We teach a 2-hour CE class about growing your
CE
business.
means Con Ed, continuing education.
Check. We teach a class for real estate agents so they can get through these myths. So if they're working with a veteran, they can be better equipped to serve them well and let's say get them in the home quickly and move on to the next task and hopefully get referrals out of it, right? You want to grow your business. Being better equipped to serve veterans is a good way to do it. But you got to be armed with the right knowledge. So we train real estate agents and we train loan officers through the Veteran Mortgage Advisor Program, which they go through and get that education.
So is this like if I had an organization I could bring you guys in to do the training for my people?
So
or you have trainings
we've
and
done,
we sign up and come
we have
to?
individual loan officers that have gone through our course, and I mean, hundreds of individuals that have gone through the course throughout the country. We've also gone out and taught at lending institutions. We went and taught a whole bank in Chicago a month ago about VA, it was a couple months ago now, but we taught their whole operations team, all their loan officers. 30 days later, we got an email from the owner of that company, and he said, "Hey, we have more VA business in our pipeline right now than we closed all of last year."
Awesome.
So what we're teaching works. I teach loan officers to do my model of embracing one brand, focusing on it, and being that niche guy that doesn't have to call every agent and say, "Hey, I'd love to have coffee and talk." And
Thank you.
I don't want to eventually get 10 realtors to send me all of their business. I want
Nobody
1,000
wants-
realtors to know I'm their VA guy because I'm literally an asset here at your disposal.
And nobody
But I'm
wants
not
your
calling
coffee.
you.
I promise
I know.
you. Nobody worth having coffee with
know.
wants your coffee.
So that's our pitch for the loan officer side.
Can we make sure that some kind of contact info gets in the show notes so that people, if you had interest or if you're curious?
I mean, I think I'm easiest to find on Facebook.
Okay.
And you can certainly find the Veteran Mortgage Advisors on Facebook. We watched the loan officers that have grown their business through the model that we've taught, which is, be the best at this because you have the knowledge, and be able to equip your sphere with the knowledge you've got, and your business will grow. And we've watched that happen. Just in the same way that I am pretty much an only VA guy.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a lot of people who said, "You're never going to be able to grow if that's all you do." It's like, watch me.
Yeah,
watch me. So
that's an unfortunate thing they said to you, because I think it's the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you can be
jack of all trades.
Exactly. That's what
master of none.
Say. So, I mean, you're going to turn down some opportunities, obviously, or you're going to miss some opportunities. There are absolutely people who think I can't do a conventional loan. Like, of course I can't do a conventional loan. Anybody can do a conventional loan. But the reason I stay consistent on messaging of VA is because I want that agent that I met one time 3 years ago who still happens to be friends with me on Facebook to remember when she does get that one veteran, oh yeah,
you're the VA guy.
That VA guy. Because my preferred partner has done 3 VA deals in the last 2 years. I've met lenders who have been in this business for 20 years and never wrote a VA loan. So do you think they're not meeting veterans? Of course they're meeting veterans, but they're putting them in the wrong program.
Maybe not even asking the question, are you a veteran?
Right.
Doesn't
or
even
what happened to me.
radar.
I got put in an FHA loan when I came home from Iraq and bought a house. And she said, "Save your benefit for your big boy house." And I'm like, okay, because you're a professional and I'm an idiot grunt.
I am shocked.
And so I trust, I trusted that advice and got an FHA loan, which I have a rating with the VA, Service Connected Disability. So I don't have a funding fee on a VA loan. VA loans don't have mortgage insurance. I went with an FHA, which had both. Cost me thousands of dollars, right? And I didn't know any better, which is a problem we have with the veteran community. Is it's not that there's not outlets and resources and things like that. It's just that there's almost so much we don't know where to start.
Yeah. And the water is very muddy by false information from marketing that looks like information.
Right. Oh, yes. And then, again, your community and mine, we don't help the situation by saying, could you go conventional? Yeah. They could, but it's going to cost them money that they shouldn't. Yeah. Well, and that when I bought a house, not that I want to make any accusations or anything, but back then loan officers actually got paid different based on the product that they wrote.
Yes. So you were getting
they've done
routed
Well,
into a product based on, there was no real
I don't know.
fiduciary.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it could have been that was just what made the most sense from her perspective, but
It's very kind of you to hold that out as a possibility.
I want to trust people when I can.
Sure.
So,
Absolutely.
so
I don't know how to wrap it up. I want to ask you for some
until next time,
fine word, you have parting words. I want to talk about asserting dominance. I want to mention again, fancy brain. And I feel like the only way that it really visibly that I could discern your service fucked you up is in your perfect lawn.
And that might have been a problem beforehand, but if it were, if we were to have another hour,
yes. I can make that happen.
Things we would talk. Well, that's all right. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Save some for next time.
What I like talking about is the personal finance side. I like the veteran stuff. I don't love talking about me, but I'm happy to do it. This was fun and I hope informative.
Absolutely. And really, when I bring you back to talk about the personal finance stuff, because I would love that too. I have huge gaps in my personal finance education. And at almost 50 years old, it's almost embarrassing how much I know I don't know.
Well, I like it as it pertains to the VA in particular.
Perfect. I can tease out gems myself.
Because I'm a budding real estate investor, right? I've got a couple real estate or rental properties, and it's because I had the VA benefit.
Yeah.
And people don't think that way, but if more veterans thought about this and knew better, and more real estate agents and lenders could show these things to the veterans in the beginning and how they're uniquely positioned to get into that game. I mean, if you owned multiple properties in the last few years, you've done okay, right?
Yes.
Like these markets are nuts. You want to own a piece of it. Talk about a hedge against inflation. Like property's where it's at right now.
For sure.
So
now you're a known entity. I mean, we could sit here for another hour. I don't know if we should. The timer stopped, Eric. This is a record. We just hit a record.
Well, glad I could be a part of it.
But now you're a known entity. So when we bring you back, then people can know who you are.
Cut right to the chase.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Will you come back?
I'd love to come back.
All right. Thank you
for
so
having me.
much. Thanks for sharing your story and your wisdom.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
The info given is current as of this recording, but remember, the market changes and real estate is hyper local.